Hello and welcome to episode number 103 of the WP Cafe show with me, Keith Devon, and my co-host, Mark Wilkinson. It is the show where we talk about WordPress development and running a WordPress business, warts and all. Mark, how have you been this week?
It has been a very, very busy week this week. Hello, everyone. It's been... I looked back this morning, actually, and thought, in many ways, it's been a bit of a frustrating week, but actually, in many ways, it's been quite good. I've been doing lots of development stuff, which has led to its challenges, which leads to frustration. But actually, it's been nice to get into some projects and into some problem solving again, which has been good. So I'd say it's overall been a positive week. I've had lots of sales calls. I've had some purchases of Job Relay, which has been nice. Got a few of those to build, or built a few of those, or I say built, integrated, maybe the better word.
Yeah.
So I think it's been a successful week, really. What about yourself?
I have had a very frustrating time. Had a little meltdown to you yesterday. It's been similar in the sense that it's busy, and we're getting to do some of the stuff that we kind of have wanted to do. In terms of development and stuff, but I also find it very, very frustrating working with WordPress and the editor, and I've also been affected by the drama recently. I've let that get under my skin, you said to me yesterday, just get off Twitter for a bit, just stop checking it. So I've tried. I think I've looked at it maybe once since then yesterday. So all that stuff's really getting me down. So I had a bit of a crappy day yesterday, to be honest. But I have enjoyed doing a few little bits of front end stuff in the old fashioned way, which has been quite nice. So it's been mixed, but we do have stuff to talk about as a result.
Absolutely,
because we've been cracking on with this new build and coming up with challenges and hopefully coming up with one or two solutions. So yes, welcome along, everyone. And if you are watching along live on YouTube, please do say hello in the comments. It's always nice to see you here. Nick says hello. Hello, Nick. Nice to see you. So let us know if you're watching along. If you like the show, give us a like, consider subscribing, all that good stuff. But we'll crack on. We've got a bunch of things today to talk about. We've got advanced columns, we've got loading styles for blocks, we've got galleries and how we're implementing galleries. We might say photo albums instead, because there's people just use the galleries block. We've got card blocks that we've built, which are kind of cool. A little shout out for a product or a plugin, and I think you put something in about making short videos, so that'll be an interesting little one at the end. Cool. So advanced columns.
So this was partly because of a design. So this particular project we're working on is one that was designed by an outside agency, and they delivered the designs to us. But one of the modules on the homepage, our client wasn't particularly happy with the design, and they thought it could be pushed a bit further. So you decided to have a go at making something a little bit more modern and dynamic, and came up with this sort of it's like a what's on section, all the stuff that's going on with the client at the time. So it's going to feature videos and pictures and calendar stuff and everything. So you came up with this really cool looking grid. I want to call it like a masonry grid. It's not quite a masonry grid, but it's like a grid of content essentially. But it's got different sizes and things, which make it complicated to do in the block editor. So I'll let you take over with what you did to try and solve that problem.
So I knew of a plugin that I've kind of dabbled with before and never actually used in production, called Advanced Columns. There's a free version of it and there's a premium version of it. And it is basically CSS grid in WordPress, and it's just way better than the default grid implementation in Core. So you can build your grid, how many columns, how many rows. You can then set the number of grid items that you're going to place on that grid, and then you basically start dragging and dropping those items around the grid. So you can say, I want item 1 to span 2 columns and 3 rows, and I want item 2 to span 1 column and 2 rows, and you've just got this really nice and easy interface. They've solved a difficult problem, and the beauty of this plugin is that there are responsive controls. Yes. So I don't have to just let it do what it wants on mobile. Because that's one of the first things we did. We built it in desktop, and I wonder what that looks like on mobile. And it just shrunk, didn't it? I think it didn't collapse or anything. It just shrunk.
Yeah, it just kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller.
Yeah, which was obviously ridiculous because this is like a 12-column grid or something. So I just said, well, I switched over to mobile and said, use a different grid for mobile. I created my grid on mobile. I placed all the items where I wanted them on mobile, and hallelujah, it worked. It's really good. I have come up with a little snag when trying to get a group to fill the height of a grid item. And it works in the editor, and it doesn't work in the front end. And I do think it's a bug with the plugin, but I could be wrong. But it looks like there's a style missing.
One thing I would say is the plugin that you were using is probably slightly out of date, wasn't it? I think. So potentially that could be fixed. I don't know. We should say that, I suppose, because I think we just grabbed it from a few months ago when you'd first had to play with it, so it may well have been updated.
I didn't notice that there was an update available, but maybe I could actually be on a completely old version of the plugin. I'm not even sure about that, to be honest.
From a layman's point of view, because I don't understand CSS and grids very well, WordPress has a grid block. So what does it not do that this one does?
Well, there's no responsive controls for a start. And I don't think that you can...
As in, what does the WordPress grid block, do that this new advanced columns does?
I don't think you can span things in the way that you can in this one and drag your grid items around the place. I think you can set the grid... There's like an auto grid by default. Do you know what? I might just have a little play while we're speaking. I can't remember exactly, but let me just add a grid. I've got them both here.
So I could see visually that there was just not the same control, but I just wondered what the advanced columns one really does solve this particular problem that you can't solve with the grid block.
Sure. So I can't, as far as I am aware, change the width of... I think the default grid block, all the columns are the same width for a start.
Got you. Yeah, whereas
I can't say span 2 columns for this item, so it's just equal columns.
Yep.
Or you can set... There's 2 modes. There's an auto mode, which is... Sorry for the banging, by the way. There's someone building a garden shed right beside my shed. If you hear that. But yeah, there's an auto mode, which basically means you just add items to the grid and you set the minimum width, column width, and then the grid just kind of adapts. And I just find that doesn't really ever work that well. Especially the way it wraps, so that it'll wrap onto a new line and it'll be left aligned, I think. I don't think it's not like Flexbox where you could center align that kind of last item on its own row.
We tried that with the cover block, cover sort of little cards we created, didn't we? Instead of putting them in a column, because in a column they go to one column too quickly and they're really, really wide. So we tried to put it in a grid, but then everything just got shuffled to the left-hand side of the screen when you made the screen smaller. So so where we had 5 boxes in a row, you ended up with 3 and 4 and 1, and then 4, 3 and 2, and it would just the space and a bit of it all the time. It just didn't look right, did it?
Yeah, exactly. So you just don't have the kind of control that I would want, and there are no responsive controls. So I find that I just think that that's massively important with this kind of layout stuff.
We've tweeted, I've tweeted that responsive controls are certainly something that would help solve a lot of problems. And I know recently there was some talk about how they could be implemented.
Yeah.
How does advanced columns allow you to do things differently on desktop and mobile? What's the interface look like that allows that to happen? Because I think a lot of the debate in the community is that responsive controls just clutter the UI and make it really difficult to understand. So I'd wonder if they've managed to get a good implementation of it.
They've done it in a way similar to the way other page builders do it, like Elementor and stuff like that. So in the block sidebar where all the controls are, there's a small little icon which defaults to desktop, and it shows you like the screen size that you're currently kind of editing in. I think it's right. Mobile last. These things are kind of always mobile last. So like the default is the desktop experience or whatever, rather than the mobile experience. And then you just click that little icon and you can say, it's called Active Query in this case. And you can choose, I think because I'm on the free version at the minute, you can choose between desktop and mobile. I think the
query
paid version,
media query, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah. So then I can say the base grid, for example, I'm on desktop and I say 12 columns and 3 rows, and then I click the active query, change it to mobile, and my base grid changes to 6 columns and 6 rows, and I can edit the area positions for that particular query, and I just toggle between desktop and mobile whenever I want to make changes.
Nice. Cool.
It's pretty clever. So it does it individually rather than having like a global, you're editing everything for mobile now and everything for desktop now. So it's like individually I can change like the column gap. I can change that individually.
That's cool.
Or like to the base grid or the row gap or the padding or the background type. So it's yeah. I mean, for me, that's how Gutenberg should really be doing it, something along those lines. I've heard some people say that so at the top of the editor, you can switch. There's a view mode. This is just by default. This is in Core, and you can view the editor in desktop, tablet, or mobile. And I would suggest that when you're in tablet and you make changes, maybe they only get applied on tablet, for example. Yeah. Someone was talking about this recently. Who was it? There was a conversation on X about it. I think Brian Cords.
I think, wasn't it? Brian.
I don't
Jamie,
think it was Rick. Maybe I saw a different conversation. I think maybe it was Nick and Brian that I saw talking about it. I can't remember.
Could have been. Yeah, I'm sure.
But there are conversations being had. So hopefully this is something that comes, because it'll really, really help. For example, the columns. So like I'm using, I won't use columns for this. Actually, I'll use advanced columns. But like the core columns block, say I have like a full width section of the page and I split it into 5. So I set it to 5 columns. I mean, that looks great on desktop because each of the columns is 200, 300 pixels wide. Just before it hits the mobile breakpoint, each of those columns is about 50 pixels wide. So it just like all the text like just breaks and just looks awful. You just need that. You need that kind of control for me. Initially I was against responsive controls and I thought themes should take care of it. But the way that the editor has gone and the amount of control that it gives us, I think we do need that.
I think for me, responsive controls is not to do all of the media queries in there. It's to sort of just fix the things that you can't fix doing it the way we're doing it now, if that makes sense. Like, you still want to use intrinsic design, but you just want to say, actually, it just doesn't work here, so I need to fix it. And the way to fix it would be just to jump in and do it in there instead of having to...
Yeah, it should be a light touch thing. It should be like the defaults work 90% of the time.
Correct.
But if you just need to make that little change, then
it's there for you. Yeah. I agree. I think that's the way forward anyway. Yeah. Anyway, it sounds like a good plugin. It sounds like it's well worth a look. Advancedcustomfields.com if you want to take a look at it.
Advancedcolumns.com. Don't
Advancedcolumns.com. My apologies. Advancedcolumns.com. And interesting, I just looked at it. It says that the professional version, which is the paid version, does a mobile first mode. So it looks like you can start with mobile first and then go the other way.
That's interesting.
Which is interesting. I know people like mobile first design, so maybe that's something important to. So yes, advancedcolumns.com. I'll get right this time.
Yeah, check it out.
Look at it. Check it out if you have not already seen it. Moving on. Next on our list to chat about was loading styles for any block. So this came up in this recent project that we're building on, and there's kind of two aspects to this, wasn't there? There was if we've added a block style to a block. So I'm thinking of buttons. You might add styles for primary, secondary, outline, fill, that sort of thing. Then we wanted to be able to not allow the user to make changes in the editor specifically. We might want them to change the background color, but we don't want to start messing around with padding and size and border radius because we've kind of defined those styles. So we wanted to basically provide those styles with CSS, and we wanted to obviously think about where we're going to put that CSS. And the answer we came up with, well, let's load a style sheet for each block that we want to add custom styles to. Now, WordPress comes with a wonderful function these days, WP Enqueue block style, which kind of does exactly that. It only loads if the block is on the page, so it's nice and performant. And even better than that is if your style sheet is really small, it actually inlines the CSS out of the style sheet so that it's even faster. So we came up with a quick way of sort of doing that, which was to sort of place your CSS files in a specific folder in your theme. I think we've gone for assets blocks. I think that was what we went for. And then you just name your file the same name as the block. So if you want to do like core/button, you just name your file core-button. And then I've got a little piece of PHP code, which I've actually just improved, thanks to a little bit of feedback from Frank, who's just given me on CSS, just to make it a little bit more performant. We basically check all of the CSS files in that folder, and for each one of them, we just loop through them, and then basically enqueue and register the style for it, so it's nice and performant. So from the developer's point of view, if you're Keith and you're building this, all you need to do is you just need to create a style sheet, core-whatever the name of the block is, core-heading, core-column, whatever, into that file, and it will automatically get registered and enqueued and work with that thing. So that's really quite a nice way of doing it. I posted that on my X yesterday, and I'll do the updated version, which is Frank's helped me sort of improve a little bit, which is nice. Previously, it was just getting a list of all the blocks, which is fine, but there's quite a lot of blocks. So rather than getting all the list of all the blocks and looping through them, you may as well just get a list of the files you've got and then register them for the list of files you've got, in which case I think we've got 3 at the moment.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So that's probably a better way of doing it. And I also saw Elliot Richmond that had something out on his YouTube channel about how he does it. Very, very similar. So maybe worth checking that out again. But it's a good idea to sort of like just enqueue assets and things. Maybe we could extend that to do JavaScript as well. Not sure, but we can see. So anyway, that's that.
Yeah, I'm sure that would work, actually. That would potentially be really useful.
Yeah. So
it did raise... Sorry, the banging's getting louder. It did raise an interesting point as well, though, around how we use block markup in some of our custom blocks, so that like the styling is just already there. And you raised a really interesting point. Is like if we're using like the columns block markup in a custom block, are we actually going to get the styles for that? And if there isn't an actual columns block on the page, so we haven't fully tested all that yet, but that's something that might trip us up. I don't know if you found a solution to that at all, or if we can just...
I haven't, no.
No. Maybe it's just we have to just enqueue certain block styles for our custom blocks.
We can do that. I've done that in the past. So when you create a custom, what did we do that on? Oh, that's right. I've created like a post listing block, and that actually uses the same markup as our card block. And therefore, we've already got the styles for the card block when the card block's on the page, but obviously the card block won't be on the page because it's in the block. So what I've just done is enqueued the style for another block when this block's on the page. So you can definitely do that. That possibly is a way around that situation. But there is other things, like, because other things might happen with that block. Other plugins might say, well, I'll do my thing when I know the columns block is on the page. So if you're using another block that isn't the columns block, but you're using the same markup, it will never get. It's difficult to do that, I think. So it's
that might actually be a good thing, though, so that those functions only actually do run on the actual columns block. Yeah, so I don't know. There could be times when that's actually a benefit. Yeah, absolutely.
Depends what it is. Yeah. So that was loading styles and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. So we've had another challenge, haven't we?
We have,
with this website around what we were calling galleries, but we've now named photo albums so that they aren't confused with the galleries block.
Yeah.
So essentially, the school wants to have the concept of a photo album that they can have an archive page for, and that they can link to photo albums or show photo albums in blog posts, but also have a kind of single view of this photo album. So we had a conversation. We had some ideas around it, and then we had a conversation with the school around what they really wanted, and it.
I'll be right back in 1 second, Keith. I'm
really sorry. No worries. 1 second. I can continue this. So we had a conversation with the school about what the school wanted from this functionality, and as you can probably imagine, like, it wasn't a fully fleshed out idea. They had some kind of rough concepts of how they thought this would work, and once you start asking the difficult questions, the answers aren't necessarily there. So we got to the stage, I think, where we realized that they needed an archive page, they needed a single view, they needed a way to link to the single view with a card of some kind, and they also needed a way to kind of output at least some of the images of that gallery in line in a blog post or a page. So we thought of like loads of different ways that we could potentially handle this. Our first thought these days is always, what can we do without any development work? Like, what can we use the native tools? We thought about synced patterns, and that was we were pretty close to using synced patterns, but we didn't.
So my thought was synced patterns. So essentially, you're in a news post and you want to create a gallery, a photo album, let's say. So what you do is you just add the gallery block, you put all your photos in it, and then you turn it into a sync pattern. You give it a name, and we can put it in a category, client name, photo albums, or photo album category. And then, because it's a sync pattern, it's now a post essentially on the website, because all sync patterns are just posts. You can then drop it into other posts. So you could go into your photo album post type and drop the same sync pattern there. And then if you change it in one of those places, it will change in both of those places. So that actually sounds really good. The downside to that is that all of your photo albums are kind of inside the sync patterns section. So when you're looking for patterns, you'd have all these different photo albums in there. Again, I don't know how bad that would be until you start using it, in terms of and they are categorized, so it would be a bit easy to manage. And then there's took a video as well, wasn't there? So that wouldn't really work with that and things like that. So you couldn't put other items into that photo albums page. You couldn't put things like, so I don't know, it didn't feel like the right thing to do to me. And then also, how do we say, and again, you could do this, we'd have to build a custom block though to say, show me the latest 4 galleries, or sorry, photo albums on a page, because you have to then query the synced patterns, or the block post type as it is, which you could do, because you can do, it's just a taxonomy when you category that, so you could do, but there's nothing native that will allow you to do that, so we'd have to build something for that as well. So in the end, we went against that. So what we've done is we've got a post type called photo albums. And what I've done is when you create a new post in that post type, it drops an empty gallery in the editor, and it locks the rest of the editor out. So you can't add any blocks, you can't move them. Well, there's no point moving them, there's only one there. All you can do is go in and add your images, and you can still change the settings on the gallery block, so you can choose your number of columns and etc. the other thing that I found I couldn't do was I wanted to ensure that all gallery images were set to the expand view, which basically means when you click it, it'll pop up in a lightbox. And I couldn't find a way of doing that without just defaulting that to all images on the website. So every time you add an image now, that will be the default. And you'll have to turn it off for a single image in a post, for example. I think that's better, though, than dropping a gallery of 90 images and having to go to each one and say, I want to expand it. It's just crazy to me. I like it just do that at the top level. So that's what happens there. And then I've created, because it's a post type, we've already got a block where we can show posts, latest posts from a specific post type, latest posts in a specific category. That's an ACF block with some options and things on. So we can use that block to sort of say, show me the latest 4 photo albums, or show me the latest 3 from this category or whatever. So that's good. And then I've built a block which needs some styling work doing, which essentially will enable you to drop a photo album into another post or page or whatever, and it will grab the first 6 images of the gallery, and it will display them eventually as a slider. So you can just show a little slider, and then the user could then put a little button underneath that says, view the full gallery, view the full photo album, and it would link to the single photo album page. So that was not difficult to do, actually. When you've got a gallery, so what you do is you query for your photo album. You then parse the blocks that are in the content, and it gives you a massive array of all the blocks. Find the gallery that's in there, which there should only be one block because it's all locked. And then you're looking for the inner blocks inside that, which gives you each images, and then you can just pull 6 of them out, and then you've got to loop through those and output them on the pages you want them to. So that's how I did that. So that's done. It just needs some styling and make it into a slider and do that sort of thing. So that's the plan anyway. So I'm sure there's other ways of doing it.
Any downsides to the approach? So the single view, Mark, remind me, is not now related to how it's going to display inline in another poster page. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
They're separated.
They're separated. So when you drop the, show me this photo gallery block, it's just pulling the 6 images. I just grab the IDs, and then the block sort of, just the attachment image, whatever it is, to output them. So it's completely separate to the actual gallery that's embedded into the single post. So, if you make that wide aligned or you make that full aligned or whatever, it doesn't matter. You're not going to see that in the dropped version into the post. So it's completely separate. Right.
It's good.
So that's photo albums. Work all galleries. That was very confusing when we were trying to explain to the client what's happened.
I would say as well, it was quite interesting because we were on the call and we were doing a bit of screen sharing. Mark was screen sharing with the client to kind of try to describe some of the concepts we were talking about. And you didn't notice it, Mark, but when you were showing the client just like adding an image or a gallery to a post, they had the biggest smiles on their faces. So like their current system must be like just so awful, because just adding an image like in line to some text seemed to be magic to them. So we've got a low bar to try to jump over, which is good.
That's good that they've done that. I always find when you use Microsoft Teams, we have to use Teams, don't we, with this client, because they don't have Google internally. And when you share your screen on Teams, you can't see your screen being shared. So you've got to just guess that you're sharing it. So I find it really funny that I can't sort of see what I'm sharing as in the feed of like the video feed that you're seeing. So that's why it's quite hard to keep your eye on everyone else and do it. We got there in the end, so it's good. Anyway, moving on. That's photo albums and how we've attacked that. I mentioned card blocks, probably. So I don't know if I mentioned this last week or not, but we've this website is basically made up, like 50% of the content is just like cards that link to things. And there's like 4 different types of cards, maybe 3, maybe 4.
I think there's 4 if we include the photo album one.
Yeah. So we were thinking about how to go about doing that. And eventually we just decided the easiest way to do this would be an ACF block, because we can control the markup of the card really easily then. We can make updates to those cards, and they will globally update wherever they've been used on the website. So that's what we went with. So we've done an ACF block. We've got like a card type drop down where you can choose, and naming the card types is really difficult. So you look at a design and you think, well, I've got to give this a name now. So how do you name it? So I think we went with cover, which was like image, which fills the card, and then text over the top. We went with offset, which is like an image with a box, a coloured box at the bottom, which is slightly pulled over the top of the image. And then with text on it. So that was an offset one. Then what was the other one? Cover offsets.
So an overlay, text overlay or something?
Oh yeah, that's the one where the image is behind a coloured overlay, and then there's text just in the middle of it, that sort of thing. So
yeah,
that's what we went with. Whether that makes sense to the client or not, I'm not sure. But they'll
get the hang of it. They'll get the hang of it. Yeah.
So those used extensively throughout the site, and then we were able to reuse the markup for the card block in our like post listing block because they output the stuff with cards. So it was nice to be able to reuse that and then load the CSS from the card block when you had the post listing block, which is good.
Are you able to reuse that in terms of like we have that template somewhere that both blocks refer to, or did you have to duplicate that markup?
Yeah, I had to duplicate that markup. That would be nice though.
It would be nice.
It'd be nice to be able to set the markup in WordPress somewhere so that you can just go and edit it in the WordPress somewhere. But
yeah,
I don't know how to do that, so. But
well, initially I was trying to build those cards in the editor, but they were just they're too complicated. There's too much custom stuff going on. They weren't straightforward enough. But I think it's a nice solution.
You get to a point though when you do like those cards in the editor, it's just like there's just no point in doing them in the editor because I'm doing so much custom stuff. I may as well just do it custom to start with, which is the route we've gone down, rightly or wrongly. That's what we've decided on. We need to be a bit more forceful in making decisions rather than keep, tossing and turning about which is the best method to use. Otherwise, we never get anywhere.
It's true, but we do care about making the right decision. So, yeah, Nick. Nick says, sounds like a much better approach than saving them as synced patterns and then erasing them accidentally with the create block theme, as I did this week. That is actually something that we should mention. So I was talking to Nick actually this morning about this. Apparently,
and also posted, and he said they'd done the same thing.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I don't know if it's a new button. I think Nick said it was something new within the create block theme plugin. That whenever you kind of save your changes, and it's defaulted to this is selected, it also saves your synced patterns, but it doesn't really. It saves them as patterns and deletes all your synced patterns. So be super, super careful whenever you're using that, because I think it's been quite painful for Nick and possibly others. I don't know if it's a bug. Yeah, it's create blocks theme plugin does this. Yeah, so we've got to be careful about that. So don't just hit the wrench and hit save willy nilly anymore. Like actually make sure we know what we're doing. That sounds a bit painful. Imagine if you built a whole site based on those. That could have been pretty tragic. So yeah,
from a backup, I guess that's the only option you've got, isn't it?
Yeah, from a database backup if you have one, but if you don't have one locally, for example. Yeah. It's something to do with the fact that synced patterns can't be saved to the file system. They have to be in the database.
Surely it should tell you that then.
I think it sort of does. Nick said it sort of does tell you on the button.
It really doesn't, because more than one person's made the same mistakes. It doesn't.
Yeah, it obviously doesn't. That warning doesn't really serve its purpose, but there you go. Something to look out for sure. Nick says there's some talk on GitHub about it, so hopefully that'll be fixed at some point. Because I think if you can't save sync patterns properly, don't have that option to do anything with them.
Yeah, just leave them. Why would you
default it to off or something like that? That seems kind of weird.
Right, next on the list is a plugin that I think you've added to the list. And
it
does look super useful.
I just added it because a friend of the show, friend of us. I don't know Paul very well, but we've spoken to Paul before. Paul Halfpenny. What's his agency called?
Filter.
Thank you. They have a plugin called Personalize WP. And he just kind of mentioned it to us in an email. There is no affiliation. There is no sponsorship going on here. I just thought it looked really cool.
Yeah, it does.
So it's a bit like bit like block visibility, the Nick Diego plugin, in that you can kind of turn blocks on and off based on certain conditions. So I think there's some crossover. Paul, if you watch this, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments or whatever. I think there's a little bit of crossover, but there's just loads that you can do with this thing. And especially, I think if you're in the e-commerce world, I could see this being really, really useful. So there's things like show or hide blocks based on the current cart contents, the customer's total spend, the total amount purchased. There's things about days of the week,
returning visitors,
returning visitors, the time of day, UTM tags. Like I said, I think some of this is covered in block visibility, but it really does. It seems like a super cool plugin.
Be interesting to learn though. How does it know I'm a returning visitor? That's interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. Does it set its own cookies?
Yeah, it must be collecting information to know I've been here before, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I would think so.
It does look really powerful. I haven't, and I said this to Paul when he sent the email. I was like, I know about it. I knew about it for a while because I watched his talk in WordPress London, sorry, a few months ago. He did a talk about it, and I watched it and thought it was really interesting.
Yes.
I've just never really come up with a project that I think I could use it on, but I'm sure there will be one. And when the project's right, it's definitely something to look into. So it does look a really good plugin. I'm sure it's excellent.
Yeah, so if you want to personalize your WordPress website, definitely check it out. It looks really good. And then the last thing on the agenda today is something that you added, Mark, making short videos. So what's this all about?
I've been looking at doing some short form videos for things like LinkedIn and things like that, maybe even like YouTube Shorts and things like that. And I just how to go about doing it. So we have a lot of video of content. We do videos on here, as you know. Think about cutting little clips up and things. But the most difficult thing is like getting the auto captions to do, because I don't want to spend even just doing like a minute's worth of captions can take you like 5 minutes to type them all out, get them in the right order and so on. So I was just wondering if anyone had any suggestions. I've had a go with a few online tools. They're all paid. And they look pretty good, actually. One was called Veed, I think, which actually worked really well. And then a lot of people were mentioning something called CapCut, which I had a go with this morning. And that looks nice. But again, there is a free, you get so many things for free, but then you have to pay so much. It's like 10 quid a month or something. So if you're producing, fair free videos, it's not so bad. So I've just been having to play with that. It's quite exciting just to sort of like get you. I mean, I don't know.
So it does the captioning for you.
It's got an AI thing that you just press. Yeah. And that's it'll give you so many for free, and then it'll start wanting you to pay for it. So but it's pretty nice, and it's I mean, for me, video editing software is like some of the most complicated things ever. This was relatively straightforward to understand and use, which was nice. Nick mentions there like Adobe Premiere. That just seems massive to me to even like. I don't even want to go down that road. Really.
Tool.
Yeah. I just want something simple. Gives me some nice editing tools. Put some captions in, maybe put some text at the top. That's it. That's all I want to do. So I've just been playing around that this morning. So if you see some dodgy videos of me out there in the wild, that's probably me messing around with the.
Yeah, I think did this come from the fact that we were playing around with the StreamYard auto-generated reels? And things?
Yeah.
Which was quite cool, but not quite.
StreamYard had this auto AI thing where you can give it a video, which it does because obviously it saves all these videos in StreamYard, and then there's this button that says like auto generate Reels content. It's basically like 1 minute footage of it, and it'll auto generate. It'll try and find in the video the sort of best clips, and it says that it works best when you've got like an interview format. Because it's probably going to pick up when you ask a question, and then it's going to pick up the answer. You see that sort of thing. So it came up with a few good ones. But most of the ones for us, it just didn't really get it right at all. But it just got me thinking about like the content we've got out there, and can we do something with it? Particularly, we've got some recruitment focused content that we did quite a while ago. We've talked about picking it up again actually, and I found that when I started thinking about what I could do with it, there's actually a lot of good stuff there that I can snip it down into short clips and then try and purposely put that in places and so forth. So I was trying to do that, and this just trying to get some tools that would help me do it faster, basically.
Yeah.
So anyway, I've given it a go. And we'll persevere. So yeah.
Can you, in that tool, can you get 2 of the videos? Like, so the problem with the StreamYard one, it was nearly perfect, except that we were still side by side on a kind of portrait view. So there's like loads of space top and bottom, and ideally you'd want to stack us and then have the captions at the top or underneath. In the tool that you tried, the CapCut one, can you like put 2 feeds in and position them and
so if I wanted to do that, I'd just drag this vid, like, so let's say we're using this video, I'd just drag that into the timeline twice and then just put one on the top and on the bottom. That makes sense. And they should sync up anyway. So but you can do, I quite like square ones because they work quite well on Twitter as well, and they don't look too bad on things like LinkedIn because they sit in the feed quite nicely. And if they're in the, like, I don't know what they call it on LinkedIn, is it like the Reels feed or something? They're like full height, but they sit in the middle, so they don't look too bad. So it's that's kind of a format that would be quite good for most places, if that makes sense. So I might try and experiment with that, but it's good. Nick just mentions Canva there. I never thought of Canva, actually. Didn't realize that did video. I thought it was more more pictures and stuff like that. Maybe that's worth looking at.
It's probably worth playing with. I mean, Canva's just a beast these days in a way, and in terms of like it can do loads, but actually it's usually quite a simple user interface. That's the kind of whole point.
That's why it might be good to look at. So having a play with that.
That could definitely be worth a look.
I initially asked Bob, Bob is ChatGPT, by the way, if he could caption a video for me, and he said, "Yeah." He said, "If you upload it here, I'll do it for you." So I uploaded it, and then he just said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have the environment to do that here." I was like, "Good, you got me hopes up," and then he wouldn't do it.
Good old overconfident Bob, always willing to give something a go, isn't he? But doesn't always deliver.
Anyway, so yeah, that was a no-go. So I had to go with something else. But anyway, so anyway, watch this space. Might see something out there.
Absolutely. Well, let's wrap it up for today. Thank you so much for joining us. It's always good to have you along. Do consider liking or subscribing or both, or sharing. You know, just like a little repost or retweet whenever you see us on X would be great. We're also at wpcafe.show, so we're all over the place. Podcast,
new website YouTube, as well.
Websites. Ooh, new website. We didn't talk about Ollie.
Next week.
Maybe next week. It'll be old news by then. But yeah, thank you for your comments and questions. Lovely to have you along. We will be back, I think, next week at the usual time.
We will be back next week, but there is a twist. I'm going away for the weekend, well, for a night. So we might have to do it earlier. But that's okay. So watch the space. It might be in the morning rather than the usual 1:30 slot.
If you're subscribed and you have the notifications on, you won't miss it anyway. So
there you go.
Just get it done. All right. Until next time, thanks for joining us. See you soon.
Bye-bye.